This is Yong Wai Hou. I'm sorry if that's mispronounced. Their achievements: Malaysia national finalists in 2023, national top 4 in 2022, and they were part of the World Cup team in 2021 that got the top 16 as well. We do see the team of Amoonguss, Kingambit, Primarina, Sneasler, Porygon 2, and Garchomp.
Yeah, I think a really notable teams like this, right, is they're very focused on playing a defensive game. Notably, when you see Amoonguss and Porygon 2, typically you're going to be seeing something like a Incineroar, right? And notably, there is no Incineroar here. So I think a really important part of this matchup is going to be how does Gambit kind of change how the matchup is out, right? Obviously, it does depend on the team you're against, but typically Porygon 2 giving you a really consistent option. Setting that Trick Room, you get the Spore, right? They're just good options. So I think that's just a very cool part of it. And also too, notably actually the Kingambit is not running Swords Dance, so the Iron Head option kind of changes how it interacts with the rest of the team, right? It gives you a little bit of extra coverage, so that's gonna be interesting to see. Also the coaching, the Garchomp is always threatening. But it does seem like the team could potentially have issues with terrain, right?
Yes, just to quickly correct the name pronunciation here, it's actually Wai Hou Young. Sorry about that. We got the order of the name incorrect. But yeah, just to point out some interesting Terras here. So we've got Terra Ground Porygon as well, and Terra Steel Primarina. So that's quite an interesting interaction in how the team functions, like you said, Joe. But yeah, this is like kind of a standard team, just except for some moves in the Terras. But it's kind of a nice balanced Trick Room team. So we're going to move on now to player 2. This is Canada. This is Olivia Moledzki. Their achievements to list. So we've got Louisville Regional top 64 this season 2025. We've got the Orlando Regional top 128 2024. Fort Wayne Regional top 32 2023, and Knoxville Regional top 64 in 2023. And this team might look familiar to some of you that watched the last match, but we've got the Talonflame Incineroar with Citrus Berry this time, Indeedee, Sneasler, Electabuzz, and Ursaluna.
It is worth noting too that this is a very popular team. There are some variations on this team that are a little bit different. So for example, Citrus Berry on the Incineroar over something like Safety Goggles, right? So prioritizing the recovery a little bit more. For the most part, the team is pretty similar to the team that Carson Confer won Sacramento with, right? Notably, a lot of the Pokemon are kind of carrying up sets, with really only the Incineroar being the Citrus Berry. So it's going to be interesting to see. We saw a very similar version, right, on the previous match. So obviously this is a team that Canada favors, right? So it'll be interesting to see the differences of how this matchup is played versus the other one. In the previous matchup, right, obviously the Tailwinds you were trying to match Tailwinds, whereas in this case you're against teams kind of navigate well around.
Yeah, exactly. And the other, this team is it's a very solid team. It's got the HO option. It's also got the follow me user as well for setup, or for a bit of slower play with the E-webs as well, speed control with Electro Web. But yeah, on Wai Hou's team, it's like a Trick Room oriented team, quite a slow team outside of Sneasler, and Garchomp's quite fast too. So it's going to be an interesting matchup this time around between these two. You are cutting out a bit, Joe, by the way, just a bit, but that's fine. I can hear you. I can hear you just fine. Okay, so with that said, Joe, how do you think this one might go down? What's your kind of predictions here between the two teams?
Yeah, so obviously we'll have to see how the lead matchup goes, right? I think a really key part is going to be how do you necessarily address the Trick Room in the lead, and how do you use to, obviously capture Trick Room from Olivia's point of view. So obviously we are going to have to see, what are the best adjustments there. Typically you can normally expect to see something like an Ursaluna in the lead versus Trick Room with these kind of teams. But obviously we can go into the game right now and kind of see what the leads are out here. I think, as we're waiting for the leads to come out here, a really interesting thing to see is prioritizing the Ursaluna, right? But notably, the Kingambit Primarina was the lead, right? So with this lead, you're able to provide some pressure. Also, too, you're able to go for a Hyper Voice. That being said, of course, you do have the pressure of Blood Moon. So there are a couple of mind games. You can opt to go for Terra Steel onto your Primarina. If you opt to go for Terra Steel, is the opponent going to call it out with Earth Power. But if the opponent goes for an Earth Power and you just opt to go for Hyper Voice, no Terra, it's not super great, right? So you could even potentially, if you're on Olivia's side, think of going for a Protect here to scout out.
Yeah, exactly. And we are going to see a Terastallization here on turn 1 for Wai Hou's side of the field. And it is that King Gambit going into that Terra Dark. It's very dangerous there with the Black Glasses Terra Dark combination. So that's going to come out on the King Gambit side. And we're going to see Electabuzz just opt for the safe option here of going for the Protect. We're also going to see a Protect from the Ursaluna. So like Joe was saying, double Protect is to scout out what Wai Hou's clicking here. And it is actually a Protect from the Pre-Marina as well, so 3 Protects going on here. I think we're going to see the Kowtow cleave from that King Gambit into the Electabuzz slot, but it's just into that Protect. Okay, I think we do have some technical difficulties, so I'll do my best to fill in for Joe.
Hello.
Oh, Joe,
I'm
you're
here.
back.
Okay. Yeah, there you go. No. So I think on turn 1, right? Obviously, just kind of scouting out the turn. Now that you have a little bit better understanding of the board state based on the King Gambit Terastallization, now you're pretty safe to spam normal, right? So I think that a big thing that this Ursaluna can do, right, is now with the Blood Moon, you can obviously throw it into Pre-Marina if you're more concerned about the Hyper Voice. If you're more concerned about the King Gambit, obviously you can target, but I feel like there's a very safe follow me and attack in the slot, right? Also Taunt coming out here. I believe that's because you want to try and block the Protect the next turn so you can continue just getting big damage. I'm assuming the Blood Moon's going into Pre-Marina. We'll have to see where it goes. It does go into Prima. Will it knock it out? I assume so.
Sure.
And it is just going to get a clean knockout on the Prima.
Yeah, very, very nice play from Olivia. I do like the taunt into that King Gambit as well. So like you said, Joe, it does stop that Protect in the following turns. So it keeps up the nice pressure that Olivia has. But we are going to see a Kowtow Terra Dark Black Glasses into this Ursaluna. Okay, it does decent damage, but it's not quite taken out. We do see in the back here the Garchomp and the Sneeze there. So they're going to send out... Waihu's going to send out the Garchomp.
Yeah, I mean, Garchomp makes sense here. Obviously, you can go for Earthquake to get around the Follow Me as well, which is an incredibly good option. The main thing that you really have to consider here is how do I address what's in the back, right? Because notably, we saw in the previous match that Indeedee Sneasler was a very powerful cleanup games. And if this Garchomp takes too much chip by any means, although it is kind of hard to do in this situation, it could be a little bit harder to deal with that Sneasler and Indeedee combination in the back. That being said, I do feel like you have the 2 right Pokemon on the field right now. You do want King Gambit, you do want Garchomp there. You also can't Protect in front of your own Earthquake because of the taunt. So potentially Olivia could also just opt to go for like a Protect to try and let the Garchomp chip the King Gambit a little bit as well with its own Earthquake.
That's true, but we do see there's no Earthquake on this Garchomp actually. It's just Stomping Tantrum. Stomping Tantrum into that Electabuzz. Also a taunt coming out onto the Garchomp from the Electabuzz. And we're going to see Ursaluna go for the Hyper Voice here. Going to do quite a lot of chip damage there, if we want to call it chip, into Garchomp and King Gambit. King Gambit in return does click Kowtow into the Electabuzz, and that does take it out.
With the Electabuzz being knocked out, a big question here is what do you bring, right? So obviously you have a lot of good options here. So for example, you can opt to go for a Sneasler to come in because Sneasler would be the fastest on the field. Depending on what else you have in the back, obviously you could bring a different Pokemon, but it's going to be that Sneasler. Sneasler is obviously outputting a lot of pressure here. You have close combat into King Gambit. You have an attack into Garchomp, which is safe. Honestly, also because the King Gambit can't Protect here, it makes the mind games really awkward. Because if you opt to go for Protect on Garchomp and then the attack just goes in the King Gambit, you essentially wasted your turn, right? And if you opt to, even just go for an attack, Garchomp gets combated, and then Hyper Voice comes out, knocks out King Gambit, you're pretty much in a losing position immediately. So I would say Olivia's in a bit of a lead here, taking a better resource trade for sure in the early game, especially navigating around the Garchomp King Gambit on the field. And notably, as you mentioned, right, no Earthquake. So not being able to get around that redirection really.
Yes, that's right. And we do see a double switch out here. So the Garchomp on the Waihu side goes in for Sneeze, then Indeedee comes out over the Ursaluna slot on Olivia's side of the field, setting up a Psychic Terrain and giving Sneasler that Unburden boost with the Psychic Seed as well.
Yeah, it is worth noting too that obviously, we're going to see the Psychic come out here. It's actually going to end up blocking Sucker Punch and Dire Claw going into Sneasler, which means you could roll for status here. No status comes out, but I think a big deal here is going to be how do you play around Like, how are you basically going to play around this Indeedee and Sneasler? Because at this point, you have your Focus Sash broken, so your options there aren't great. May need to just fish for a Dire Claw into the Indeedee, try and get a sleep or a status on it, so that you can at least have 2 Pokemon to try and close out the game with.
Yeah, you could always let your Gambit go down here and bring out the Garchomp. Garchomp should outspeed the Indeedee, but obviously it will not outspeed the Sneasler. So again, that kind of comes down to potential Dire Claw shenanigans, or if close combat does or can KO the Garchomp as well. We're gonna, yeah. I mean, the time is clicking down here for both players. We're gonna see what they're gonna lock into here. Is a protect from Wai Hou Sneasler. So it's decently done. Oh, sorry, Jake.
It's interesting, right? Because I feel like with the protect, you're not necessarily like ground here, and you're probably gonna end up in a very similar situation as to what you were gonna play previous turn, anyways, right? Because you can knock out the Sneasler immediately, which is helpful, of course, right? Because you're able to go for a Dire Claw and a Rock Slide, maybe, right? But where that situation gets a little bit tricky is, okay, if Sneasler just opts to go for... Actually, like, yeah, Garchomp's too low anyway, so I feel like you'll have to fish for a Dire Claw anyways, right? So you probably had to go for something like a Dire Claw in the previous turn, into Indeedee, hope you roll Sleep, protect... well, you can't even protect because it was still taunted. No, taunt expired, actually, that turn. We saw it expire. So you would protect that turn, and then you'd have to Dire Claw into Sneasler and hope that you would get a status on Sneasler as well on Garchomp's protect, right? So a lot of things you already needed to go right in that situation. I think Olivia just put themselves in a really good situation to already have the advantage here, where there's so many odds that the opponent needs to go for to stack it in their favor.
Yes, and we do see the Garchomp protect, the Sneasler attack into the Garchomp. We do see a Dire Claw come out. It does get a poison, though, on the Indeedee, so it will not go for the sleep or the paralysis. It does get the poison. And I imagine we'll see an Expanding Force come out here from Olivia's Indeedee. That should be enough to take out the Sneasler. Yeah, it does go down.
Yeah, I mean, something interesting to note about this team, too, because I feel like we've seen this a lot of times, right? And I kind of mentioned this in the beginning of the match. A lot of times it's about how many resources can you take with that Blood Moon in the lead before you clean up with the and in the back. And a lot of these matches, right, it's just that a lot of these players don't have the proper resources to deal with those 2 in the back. And because of the speed boost on Unburden, although notably like Sneasler would outspeed the whole team anyways, right? And then you have the Indeedee, which is able to go for Expanding Forces. There's just so many options from this team to put on offensive pressure. And I think that turn where no Dire Claw went into Indeedee kind of sealed Wai Hou's fate already, right? Because you're basically in a situation where now double protect on Garchomp. I need to roll for a Dire Claw status as well on top of what I already Dire Claw onto Indeedee. So the odds were already kind of stacked against you. And I think it's just also a great point to mention that, like, because Garchomp doesn't have Earthquake, it wasn't able to properly pressure the Ursaluna behind Electabuzz, right? So the Electabuzz is actually a really effective wall into the Garchomp, which normally it wouldn't be because of the ability to read direct attacks.
Yeah, exactly. And I wonder, in terms of adjustments for game 2 here, if Wai Hou can maybe utilize that Porygon. If you can get around the Ursaluna, for example, Blood Moon or something like that, maybe you can bring out that Porygon and set up a Trick Room, and that kind of enables you to deal with the Sneasler in the late game, coming out from Olivia's side as well.
Yeah, I think I'd like to see a bit of a different approach going into 2. I don't really like Primarina and King Gambit there, because I think that the main issue that you're going to encounter is because you're running some slow Pokemon. Ursaluna and Electabuzz control a lot of the tempo, right? They're able to kind of thread in damage immediately. That double protect play you saw was super safe, right? And then next turn, great. Now I can just Blood Moon and attack and go for a taunt, so you can't protect. I just think that you need to have some kind of adjustment there. I would definitely like to see maybe the Porygon 2 being brought because of the fact that it's running Terra Ground Terra Blast. Probably going to get a special boost from that Ursaluna. But with that being said, let's go into the game 2. Let's see if there was an adjustment or if they opt for something similar. We're going to see Talonflame and Ursaluna as a slight difference, and we're seeing King Gambit and Sneasler. I also like this lead. I know it wasn't mentioned. I didn't mention it before, but you are pressuring close combat into Ursaluna. The only tricky thing here is that Talonflame could just go for a dual wing beat and kind of ruin your day.
Yeah, exactly. But this Sneasler is Terra Flying, so it could Terra away from that weakness, but it kind of seems like it's all or nothing in that instance, right? I do like this adjustment from both players, actually. You can just go for a coaching as well, or like you said, just a close combat into the Ursaluna, and it kind of has to choose which target it wants to go for.
Yeah, I mean, I think a big thing here is like, are you going to make the cover play, right? So I feel like this play is your most safe mid-ground play or approach you could take into the turn, right? You're basically guaranteeing that you'll always live the dual wing beat. You're guaranteeing that you'll get damage into Talonflame, and you're guaranteeing that you'll get damage into Ursaluna if it chooses to attack, right? And Olivia, notably in this situation, could go for a pretty punishing play, which is just going for a Protect and a Will-O-Wisp. But we are going to see actually the Ursaluna opt to not Protect. The question is did it decide to go for an Earth Power? Because if it did, this Kingambit is probably not going to...
Okay, we do see the close combat come out. It does do half of Ursaluna's HP, even with that burn, with the sneeze there. We do get a poison as well, with the Poison Touch activating on the Blood Moon, Ursaluna. And we do see an Earth Power come out into the Kingambit, so that's a great call from Olivia to take out that Kingambit in one hit.
Yeah, I mean, I think a big thing too here, right, is that like you got so much value out of this, right? Kingambit wasn't able to get damage on Talonflame, so your Gale Wings are still preserved, right? You didn't set Tailwind yet, so you're not exactly shoehorned in front of the Porygon 2, right? And notably, no Porygon 2 was brought again. So to be honest with you, obviously, you know, there is some ways you can play around the situation. This is not looking so great for Wai Hou, because the thing is that between the Ursaluna being able to pressure Blood Moon, being able to pressure Hyper Voice even, and just being able to go for Will-O-Wisp to Tailwind, Will-O-Wisp to Tailwinds, like whatever you choose to do, it just feels like Olivia has like such a wide variety of options. Actually, hovering over the forfeit button, I'm assuming that was an accident, but like,
gotta be an accident.
That's kind of funny, right?
Yeah, I think you're right. Olivia's in a really strong position with that turn one. They called it like pretty much perfectly what Wai Hou might do. But there is ways, like you said, to play around this. And actually, we're going to see a Terrestrialization on the side of Olivia, and it is going to be that Ursaluna into that Terra Normal. So I'm going to assume this is going to be a Tailwind coming out from Talonflame here, so they can outspeed the Garchomp. So we do see that Terra Normal. We see a Protect come out from the Garchomp on Wai Hou's side. And we do see that Tailwind get set up there.
This is a Hyper Voice. It's not going to be good. Because at that point, Sneasler goes down, and then you're in a not-so-great position. And yeah, it is going to be the Hyper Voice, too. Yeah.
Nice play.
Probably going to knock out Sneasler. Yep, it just knocks out Sneasler clean. At this point, like, it's tough, right? I think versus this Ursaluna team, you really need the Ursaluna on lead, right? And it felt like in both of these games, like Wai Hou was just not leading, respecting the Ursaluna enough, right? If you opt to go for something like a Porygon 2, a Mungus lead even, right? Maybe you can afford to sack your Mungus to get Trick Room up, right? And then try and pressure something like Primarina and Porygon 2 and Trick Room. But with this lead, it just gave Ursaluna too much leeway to get damage. And now basically, I think your only out here would be to maybe protect your Garchomp, protect your Mungus, hope you get a double protect so Ursaluna goes down, and then maybe you have Rock Slide and Talon option.
Yeah, we are actually going to see that dual wing beat come out onto the Amoonguss from the Talonflame. But we are going to see that Citrus Berry activate for the Amoonguss just to heal up a little bit. To hopefully take some damage from the Ursaluna in the upcoming turn. We are going to see a double protect, I think. Fail? No, that's incorrect. Sorry.
Yeah, it's Blood Moon. Yeah.
It's Blood Moon into Garchomp. It's gone. And it just leaves this poor Amoonguss 1v4 for Wai Hou's side. I don't think it's going to do it here. Amoonguss does not have enough. It doesn't even have really any attacks. So Ursaluna does go down with the chip, but it's more than done its job here for Olivia.
I mean, I think this match really showcases like how important it is to cover for a team like this, right? So this team is obviously super meta, right? Like it's super meta relevant. This team won a regional, right? You have to make sure you have lines into it. And to be honest, it felt a little bit here like Wai Hou was having trouble finding the right approach to the team, right? And I think it was a really smart team choice by Team Canada, right? If you bring a team that's as strong, you're playing it up to par, and you're able to force like these trades early, it's really difficult to stop, right? And I think there were some cases for sure where Wai Hou maybe could have gotten themselves out of some situations, but they were very specific plays you had to go for where you were essentially hedging on like 30% chance to double protect, right? Or another 30% chance to double protect. Hope you get a Dire Claw status on Indeedee, right?